Miss Karen Grant, who has been such a phenomenal partner with this Live Well Wake movement in the work with Jobs for Life and just in the Wake County area as a whole. And so, Karen, if you will, take us away.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you for that introduction. Good morning, my friends, my neighbors of Wake County. Welcome to Make It Work, a 3-series virtual symposium sponsored by Live Well Wake, as Ryan has just mentioned. I am Karen Holmes Morant. I serve as the director of the Western Health and Human Services Center out here in the western part of the county, serving Apex, Cary, Mooresville, and surrounding neighborhoods. It is both an honor and a privilege to be with you this morning as I sit in this seat on behalf of our Live Well Wake employment workforce group. It is a privilege that both the Regional Center and our Western Regional Community Advocacy Committee has the opportunity to partner in such a countywide effort. So again, I hope you all are here looking for a dynamic conversation as it continues from last week. I encourage you all to participate, as Ryan has mentioned. Fill up the chat and let the discussions flow. On behalf of the Employment Work Group and all of the members who are here and those who are yet on their way, let me say again, welcome to this virtual community and conversation. We're focusing on equity and opportunity for employees and employers. So as we have been inspired by our Board of Commissioners, as they have recognized September in 2019 as Workforce Development Month, we continue to just leverage that momentum, the vision of our commissioners, and that is why we're gathered here today. We want to increase the awareness of this conversation, engage many more in this conversation. So whereas the Wake County Live Well Wake collaboration convenes the Employment Work Group to raise awareness of the importance and ensuring that all families have a pathway to meaningful work and mobility opportunities, we are gathered today. We are gathered last week to talk about the dignity of work and get a real live testimony, if you will, from how the challenges continue to prevent us from the dignity of work. And while those challenges and those barriers was put before us, it generated great interest and it challenged us to really look towards making a change. So today, we continue the conversation. Today, we're going to talk about skills needed by employers. And next week, our final session will be about wages that work from the employer's perspective. Some of us call it livable wages. I've heard many other definitions about it, but let us shape that understanding together. So plan to be back next week. So join me in welcoming and thanking our leaders who have led us to this day, our commissioners, the director of our Live Well Wake, Kimberly Scott, who's on her way to join us, and our fearless leader, Ryan Ray, who serves as not only the executive director of Jobs for Life, but has committed to lead this countywide conversation and initiative. I encourage all of you, put your remarks, your comments in the chat as we continue this conversation and throughout this conversation. I hope you have your choice of drink, whether it's a cup of water, a glass of water, cup of tea, or coffee. I encourage you to relax in your seat, stretch if you may, but enjoy this journey with us as we move into the conversation today as we talk about the talent that is among us, but is often hidden as treasure. So let us discover what it takes to put people to work. Let me give a special thanks to Ashley, with one of my colleagues at Wake County Economic Development, for sponsoring session 2. So without any further ado, let me welcome Michael Hogan with Economic Development, who is an analyst with RTI International. So Michael, if you will.
Thank you, Karen, for the introduction. Thank you, Ryan, for the invitation to come and present to this group. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. Michael Hogan, I'm an economist with RTI. Much to Ashley's disappointment, we're located in Durham County, and I'm a Durham resident, although I am a child of Wake County, grew up in Wake County, went to Wake County Public Schools. So this is, just an incredibly important topic to me personally. And when I was, asked if I could attend and participate, it was an immediate yes. This is a topic that's incredibly important to me, the work that we've done, and then to me personally as well, the well-being of the economy in Wake County, in the Triangle region, ensuring people have access to quality jobs, the skills needed for quality jobs, and they know what those credentials and what that training is that's needed, for me is an incredibly important topic. Not just professionally, but personally. So I want to thank all of you, and then I also want to thank Ashley and give her a short introduction, a person who needs no introduction, but perhaps say a few words to get us started.
Yeah. Thanks, Mike, and thanks, Karen, for that exciting introduction that you gave. So I'm Ashley Cagle. I am with Wake County Economic Development. As has been said, we are a program of the Raleigh Chamber. So sometimes you hear us talked about interchangeably with the Chamber. In a lot of ways, we are one and the same. It's a great way for our county and our Chamber resources to go just that much further. My role at Wake County Economic Development, I'm the Assistant Executive Director, but in my role, I oversee all of the business recruitment and expansion for Wake County. So when you see in the paper things like Amazon and Fujifilm and Amgen, this really exciting past year that we've had, that's our team. That's our team at Wake County Economic Development, working with those companies to bring them here. Of course, we work very closely with our Wake County commissioners on those initiatives, but we want to keep Wake County growing, and not just growing, but growing smartly. And I know that's where everybody on this call comes into play, because you all care about the same thing. We genuinely believe in prosperity for all. It's something that's much easier said than done, especially as quickly as we are growing. And so what's interesting about the work that I do and what we do at Wake County Economic Development is we sit at the intersection of a lot of people and a lot of information, right? So every day we're working with companies who maybe want to call Wake County home, or companies who are already here but are looking to grow, or maybe facing some other kind of pain point and have a hurdle to growth. But we also are engaged every day, every week with our workforce partners. We would not be successful in business recruitment and expansion without a lot of dedicated time and attention to our talent pipeline, our ability to recruit highly skilled talent, and then retention of talent in our market. And that takes a lot of work. So we're always talking to the 12 colleges and universities that we have in the area, the public schools, our workforce development board. These are all our very close partners. And so we sit at the intersection of just a lot of information. And a few years ago, we were kind of scratching our heads like, we know a lot, we need a lot of people, we need a lot of information. What do we do? We're not ever going to be curriculum providers. We don't do the work that a lot of you all do on this call. But how can we play a role and take responsibility for growing an inclusive, rightly skilled workforce so that we can ensure that this growth is stable? So we dreamed up what we call the regional skills analysis, and quickly the City of Raleigh and Capital Area Workforce Development Board, and I know Mark Weldon, I think Barbara Brothers are on the call representing both the city and the Workforce Board, so I want to make sure they get an appropriate shout out. But we said, we can take all this information that we hear, we can trend data, everyone knows what we can find on different databases and what commerce produces, but how do we really take a forward look at what skills needs are going to be so that we can inform all of you and our other partners on those skills needs so that we can all be singing off the same sheet of music, so to speak, and that we can make good decisions about how we are inclusive in our growth and truly embrace prosperity for all. So the regional skills analysis was born. We called up Mike and we said, Mike, we have yet another project for you. RTI is a longtime partner of ours. They've done everything from us, from studying and understanding our clean technology sector all the way to work we're currently working on, which is understanding and dismantling systemic racism in our community. So our relationship with RTI is deep and wide, and the skills analysis is a perfect representation of that. So we have run this survey 2 times now. The first time was in 2017. This most recent time, we literally launched it, and Mike and I have said this a million times, but we sent out the email to promote it the day we were also told, everybody go home, it's a pandemic. So we thought, we are screwed. We have done this at the exact wrong time. So of course we paused, but it actually turned out to be the best possible time to do this, because employers were really facing something truly unprecedented and really having to think about what their skills needs were going to be from a technical and soft skills standpoint, how they were going to recruit and source these employees, and then that retention piece. And so I think there's never been a time in our history where employers have had to be as forward looking, as critical thinking about their workforce as they were when they were answering these questions. Fast forward a year later, and these are some of the things that Mike's going to talk to you about. We're looking at a workforce participation rate and workforce situation that feels like something we've never seen before. So it's just continued to get more complex. So all of that information is so critical to the work that we do at Wake County Economic Development. It has completely changed the way we do our work and the way we work with companies. And so we're excited to bring all of that to you today. We want to really have a conversation with you all about this. We know that a lot of you are doing this work, so we want to hear from you. Karen said, blow up the chat. So blow up the chat, and I'll be fielding some of the questions. Mike's going to give you a presentation. I put in the chat, I think I put it in there, a link to the actual study that we did. So you can kind of be looking at that as Mike is talking. And it is available on our website, so it's available to you anytime. But Mike's going to give us an overview, and then we're going to come back and throw some questions out to the group. But in the meantime, ask questions, give us your comments, and we're looking forward to today. So we are honored to sponsor this. This was a no-brainer for us, and also just excited to be a part of this today. So thanks to everybody that helped put it together, and I'm going to turn it back over to Mike to give you all some information.
Thank you, Ashley. My goal for today in this meeting is to go through some things that we learned over the course of this survey, talk about how they apply in the current context of the workforce, and give everyone, I think, a real kind of overview of what is some of the most relevant and the most pressing information, particularly related to skills, to credentials, to training, and to networks. There's going to be a lot of detail that that's going to be available in the link that Ashley shared, which we will have kind of available to everybody on the Wake County Economic Development website. That's going to have a lot of information on specific industries, specific geographies, specific areas. And so given our time today, and the fact that folks can only listen to somebody talk about data for so long, I'm going to really focus on some of the big picture messages and what a lot of this means, particularly in our current context. So I've got a presentation. It's going to be about a half hour of me talking. But I do really, I want to go through and hit on some of these key points and then open this up for a broader discussion once we're finished. But some big things that I just wanted to start with today. First, who are we? Who is RTI? RTI, we have been kind of an integral part of this research triangle project since the beginning. RTI is headquartered in Research Triangle Park. We are an applied research institute. People hear about us, particularly locally, and they say, oh, they're the ones who do all those big federal government projects, doing international development in West Africa or massive public health studies. But it's important for us to do work like this because we're local. This is our home. We have over 2,500 staff in the Research Triangle Park region in Wake and Durham and around North Carolina. And so this is our home, and we like to find ways to be able to use kind of our more advanced research capabilities to help address local challenges. And so for us, again, it is just really, really important that we continue to be engaged. We're engaged with the Live Well Wake initiative and working with Ashley's team on some of the work right now that Wake County Economic Development and the county commissioners are doing around systemic racism and dismantling some of these structures. So just a little bit about us and about RTI and kind of why we're here today. But I want to start by saying that this survey was run in 2020. The workforce and the economic situation in 2020 was really different from what it looks like right now. So I do want to give a little bit of context on where we are right now, and then take a step back to May and June of last year when we were collecting this data. And then talk about what that meant for the hiring outlook and how that's played out. What are some of the skills, credentials, and networks that employers are talking about, which I think is the really salient and really kind of time-tested piece that's coming out of this, and what we've learned over the last year and a half in seeing kind of how this has played out. Talk about some of our key takeaways, and then have some Q&A and discussion at the end. So where are we right now? When we look at the macro indicators, which as kind of, I'll be the first one to say has their limits, but year over year in North Carolina, employment is up in every private sector industry across the state compared to where it was in August of 2021. Again, I say private sector because really the only exception is government that has seen sustained kind of job declines. But when you look across the board, including leisure and hospitality services, professional services, trade, manufacturing, construction, jobs are up across the state. So when we look at the numbers on a large scale, companies are hiring. Many of the jobs that were lost as the result of the pandemic, many of those have come back. Not all of them, but many of them have come back. And when we look at the Triangle region, looking at labor force participation and employment, the Triangle has recovered most of the jobs that were lost during the pandemic. So when we combine the Raleigh and the Durham, Chapel Hill metro areas, in April of 2020, there were over 215,000 people out of work when compared to just 2 months earlier. Looking at both people who were both unemployed and people who had left the labor force, people who lost their jobs and decided, I'm not going to look for another one. That number has been slowly going down from kind of May of last year, where it was at its worst, to August, when the data was most recently released. And official unemployment sits at 3.7%, which is very low. For context, in February 2020, it was 3.2%. And then in May, kind of at the worst of the pandemic, it was over 11%. So when we look at the official numbers, you would say the economy, the recovery is going pretty well. But kind of when you look at the reality of it, these are just a couple of news stories from this past week that are showing that we're in a real challenge right now. We're in a real skilled worker shortage across all industries. The New York Times had this as their headline article yesterday: the worker shortage slowing the economic rebound. WRAL TechWire seems to have stuff about jobs, about skills, about employers that are scrambling to fill positions. Every 3 or 4 days, there's a new headline that's kind of like, what is going on here? And so it is, I think, accurate to say that we're looking at a really unprecedented labor market right now, where companies are kind of scrambling to look for employees. They can't find them. And when they do find them, they're not finding the ones that have the skills that they need. And this is across the board. And so we're seeking, I think, a situation that no smart economist has an easy explanation for right now. I think that there's a combination of factors of a lot of people who were in certain industries decided to leave those industries during the pandemic. A lot of people aren't ready to return back to work in person because of health or family or childcare issues. People are demanding higher wages, and we're seeing this across several different industries right now. And I know that's the conversation for next week. And then also some of these industries that are hiring, which we'll show in a few minutes, things like healthcare, IT, manufacturing, professional services, trades, require specialized skills that are hard to find in the workforce right now. And so we're in a situation where we've gone from very high unemployment to a worker shortage over the course of basically a year. And it's a very strange time. But what I think the value of kind of looking at this data is that it starts to help local practitioners in the Triangle area to understand what are some concrete steps and what are some concrete actions that can be taken in order to best prepare people for jobs, how to engage with employers on the questions of networks and training, and then how to talk to job seekers about skills and credentials. So I want to talk to you a little bit about our survey, what it told us, and what it tells us kind of about skills and credentials in the talent pipeline. So for a little background, we ran a survey, as Ashley mentioned, from March 2020 to June 2020. Quite possibly one of the weirdest times in all of our lives to be asking employers and companies what they thought about the economic forecast for the region. This was initially designed as a follow-up to a survey we ran in 2017, and it quickly changed into collecting some forward-looking and data about the pandemic and its impact on hiring, but then also continuing to collect data around skills and credentials. It was distributed in 14 counties around the region, with the most in Wake, Durham, and Johnston, but we were able to get a bit of a perspective from all the surrounding counties, and we got 737 responses, and it reflects all the counties, a mix of business sizes, and a mix of industry types. And as I mentioned, this is a really specific time, it's a really specific place, and so the survey isn't meant to be something that's generalized across the US or across other times and places, but I think is really kind of specific to this region. We did this with the help of a lot of partners. Wake County Economic Development has been just a fantastic lead on this, but something that we've learned throughout this and that you've learned through your work is that the importance of partnerships and using networks that people know and trust is really important. And so we were able to be so successful because we had dozens of partners who were helping support us to get the word out, get people motivated to take the survey, and then also helping us to distribute the findings. And I joke that I kind of had a living room roadshow going on last summer, sharing findings with whoever wanted to listen, whether it was the Johnston County Chamber or Durham Economic Development or the workforce boards or the Research Triangle Regional Partnership. People were really receptive. And looking at the names of some of the people who are attending today, you've probably heard this already because we were sharing it a lot last year. But what did the survey tell us? So from 2017 to 2020, and given that we were looking at this data in the worst of the downturn in 2020, about 57% indicated that they were going to grow their workforce over the next 3 years, with only 4% saying they were going to downsize. While this number was lower than what we saw in 2017, which was about 74% of companies, what it did tell us is that companies were projecting to hire as many as 32,000 new positions in the next 3 years. So not just counting maintaining their workforce and hiring for normal employee turnover, but growing in the next 3 years. The largest numbers in manufacturing, healthcare, and IT, each of which had, between 4,000 and 5,000 projected jobs, just from the subset of companies that we surveyed. So what this told us was that despite the really bad economic forecast that we were seeing, companies were still looking to hire, and they were still planning on growing over the next 3 years. Across all those sectors, the most positive outlook was in life science, IT, and manufacturing. And this was kind of universal across business sizes, across regions. We have a couple of regional breakdowns as well. But those three sectors, we're projecting, 3/4 or more of companies were saying they were still going to grow their workforce in the next 3 years. Also, healthcare, construction, and logistics were all planning to continue to grow. And then the areas where we were expecting to see downsizing, particularly kind of towards the bottom, were restaurants, public sector, and energy. Public sector had one of the lower projections on job growth. And we've seen this play out in that a lot of government positions have been lost over the last year. That also applies to education. And so there was this fear of loss of tax revenue and constrained government services. But across the board, it was largely an indicator of how businesses were responding to the pandemic. We heard about the restaurant and hospitality sector seeing big downsizing, and some of that has persisted up to this year. Retail as well. Some professional services were going to see downsizing as a result of the pandemic, and that largely played out. Across the region, we looked specifically at Johnston, Wake, and Durham County, and we've got representation of the whole region on this call today. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a breakdown of what they were looking at. So in Johnston County, manufacturing and construction were the industries that were projecting the most growth. Let's see here. In Wake County, we got over 300 responses, with life science, healthcare, IT, and manufacturing having the most optimistic look on growth. Again, towards the bottom, the restaurant and hospitality sector, public sector, showing less optimistic outlook on job growth. And then in Durham County, again, IT, life science, and manufacturing really as the leader in companies that were looking to grow. So there's kind of a common theme here that we're starting to see, that across these sectors, the outlook from employers in the IT sector, life science sector, manufacturing, healthcare is continuing to see a projection of growth even throughout the pandemic. When we asked companies across all the different sectors, what were the skills and the credentials that they were most commonly looking for, there was an interesting change we saw from 2017 to 2020. So in 2017, about half of the companies were looking for 4-year degrees. This is what we see here. And in 2020, 4-year colleges and universities were the third most common thing they were looking for. So only 39% were looking for 4-year colleges, but professional certifications and community colleges were the most common credential that they were looking for. And so companies are much more serious, taking, I think, professional certifications and community college programs much more seriously when we look how that's changed over the last 4 years. And then also apprenticeships grew significantly from 2017 to 2020. And so just pulling out some different quotes and different input from people, we were starting to see apprenticeship interest not just in more traditional sort of trades and manufacturing industries, but kind of professional service companies that were looking for folks with apprenticeship experience. And this was across the board. And so even in industries like IT companies are looking for more people now with professional certifications and with community college degrees and associate's degrees. So that was one real shift over the 3 years. We asked about these essential skills that were hardest to find in the workforce. And we always struggle with how to define this term soft skills. And I usually think of them as kind of essential skills. And so things that you just need in any job, no matter what. And this is something that comes up every single time, are always the same top three: responsibility and self-discipline, critical thinking, and taking initiative. Those were the most common in 2017. They were most common in the Asheville area. They were most common in the Wilmington area. And so when we continue to ask these questions, and we've asked these questions several times, these three are always the kind of essential soft skills that come to the top as the most difficult to find in the workforce. Another piece that came up that we hadn't asked directly, but was something that employers were offering a lot of information on, was interpersonal skills, empathy, and acceptance of diversity, which was something we'd never asked about before, but we started seeing recurring themes coming up as we allowed kind of employers to put in open-ended responses. Just a lot of focus on empathy, on interpersonal skills and understanding, working in a very challenging environment where people have been going through a lot of personal, family, health challenges over the last year and a half, and taking a real kind of critical look at how we understand diversity in the workforce is a piece that is coming up time and time again, and is questions we didn't ask in 2017. And so it's good that we're getting more input from companies across the board about how they're looking at interpersonal skills, honesty, trust, and diversity in their workforce. When we ask employers about the talent pipeline, rating it on a scale of 1 to 5, the opinion is generally positive, but there's a lot of variation across industries. And so it's just slightly above average for the region as a whole. But then when we look and break it down by industry, there's a big difference. So life science, IT, professional services are showing a really strong evaluation of the talent pipeline, way above average. But we look at construction, manufacturing, and logistics, they have a much less favorable opinion of the talent pipeline. And we'll get into that a little bit in a minute when we talk about networks and how companies are sourcing talent, because I think that it's hard to hear when a company says we are really struggling to hire talent, and then when we say, well, where are you looking and what resources are you using and how are you upskilling their employees, and we're not getting great responses. I think that there's a real opportunity and a real need for employers to have kind of access to some better resources in order to get that talent they're looking for. And so some initial takeaways based on the findings from the survey. Just to start, when you look at the macro numbers, the regional economy has largely recovered. The economic indicators in terms of jobs, in terms of unemployment, are looking pretty good. But the industry effects have been really uneven, and that has had really uneven impacts on workers. So the abrupt shutdown was devastating to jobs in hospitality, restaurants, and retail. And many people in that service industry left, and they're finding work elsewhere. And so we're seeing companies across the board that are struggling to hire. One positive is that we're seeing that job seekers are in a pretty privileged position right now if they're in an industry that's a high growth industry, but those skills are necessary for those kinds of jobs. So we're talking about life science, IT, manufacturing, and healthcare. They're really optimistic about hiring. They're trying to hire, but the positions that they're looking to fill require specialized skills and credentials. And these are, as we saw, they're starting to look more at professional certifications and associate's degrees, and not necessarily just four-year college degrees. But it also is a challenge because it's not a seamless transition to go work as a healthcare professional if you've had a career in the service industry without getting the training and certification that you need. The impact has been across the state as well. So we, while we were doing this work in the Triangle, we also did it in the Wilmington area and Cape Fear region. and 56% of companies expected to grow in the Cape Fear region versus 57% in the Triangle. So largely similar impact across the state. And it's a large decline from prior surveys in 2017 and 2018 that were over 2/3 of companies, either in Western North Carolina in 2018 or the Triangle in 2017. And so the impact has been felt across the state, and I think we've seen that. And then some of these growing industries, IT, manufacturing, healthcare, life science, are really starting to emphasize not just specialized skills, but adaptability and interpersonal skills to problem solve. And so it's not just having the kinds of credentials that are required, but also the ability to keep up with the industry, keep up with changes in technology, understanding automation and trade skills along with manufacturing, and in healthcare, beyond just the technical skills, the handling the high rates of stress, of burnout, of and having those interpersonal skills and empathy to be able to work in a challenging, stressful environment. And so we've seen more and more emphasis on beyond just some of the kind of typical skills you associate with these jobs and credentials, but also this new emphasis and I think needed emphasis on improved understanding of the challenges that your coworkers are going through and greater levels of empathy. Companies are looking for associate's degrees. I think this is one of the biggest findings that we had from this survey, and especially having done it 3 years prior. The companies that are looking at the most growth, manufacturing, IT, and healthcare, are really looking for community colleges and associate's degrees. So when we break it out just by the industries that are projecting the most growth in terms of numbers, those are the most common credentials. And the current workforce is continuing to need on-the-job training and continuing education because the demands of work are changing really quickly. The demands of work changed a lot in 2020. To be able to do things virtually, to be able to, automate more IT skills, rapid, need to shift business models to be able to work online and telework. And so having a lot of those technology services and adaptability, proved to be a really critical skill over the last year. And this is a piece that we come back to time and time again, and I just still struggle to wrap my head around it. But we talked earlier, and I talked earlier about how in some of these key industries, employers don't have a very favorable or a below average evaluation of the talent pipeline. And we turn around and ask them, well, what tools are you using for networking? And they typically say friends and networks. Friends and networks is the most frequent source of talent, particularly among small and medium-sized businesses that don't necessarily have a full HR department to be able to go and use some of these more complex online job portals or attend career fairs or use kind of social media, but they tend to hire from the networks that they know. And this continues to be the most frequent way companies source talent. And we've seen it we saw it 3 years ago. We've seen it in other regions of the state and other ways that companies hire. And it generates really significant challenges for companies that are looking to diversify their workforce and broaden their talent pool. And so this is, I think, one of the biggest gaps that we consistently see when we do this research is that companies, particularly ones that are, as I mentioned before, that don't necessarily have the resources to go to a career fair or have a full-time HR department or be using a lot of these online job tools, they struggle with this a lot. And so there's a real, I think, need for designing new ways of networking and recruiting, doing this virtually and breaking down some of these barriers for companies and job seekers. As we mentioned at the start of this conversation and kind of why we're doing this, and we're talking about jobs and work and dignity of work and skills, there's a real, I think something that Karen mentioned early on, there's a real gap here because the talent is out there, and in a lot of cases, it's just not being connected correctly to the companies that are looking for it. And so one of the pieces and one of the conversations we've had with a lot of the workforce development boards and a lot of the companies and private sector partners who helped with this is, what are you doing to expand that network that you hire from? Here, where I work at RTI, we've made a concerted effort over the last year to be very intentional about what networks we're using when we're looking to hire. Because typically we tend to hire people who come from our background, look like ourselves, have the same, went to the same school, came from the same city. And so having a more critical look at, are we limiting our talent pool by doing that? Is it's a piece that we're finding through doing this survey. And then finally, I think another big question we get is, what are we doing next? So this was run in the spring and summer of 2020 and kind of extended into the fall, and with some additional follow-on work that we've done over the past year. But the Raleigh Chamber, Wake County Economic Development, RTI, and all of our partners are continuing to share this data regionally and statewide with audiences in industry and economic development, education, and workforce development. The detailed data is available in the link that Ashley shared, and we can take a look at some of these. Again, this is an example from the Wilmington area as well. So we have that data if you want to take a look at that as well. It follows a really similar pattern. And it's, it's been interesting now seeing how the workforce development boards and employers have really done a big rethink of how we network and how we access talent over the last year, and what those kind of skills and credentials are that we're looking for. And so, right now, being in a very different economic situation, I wish I had an easy answer for how we're gonna get out of this, jobs challenge that we have right now. But the reality is that there's not a simple answer, and I think a lot of people are trying to navigate this very weird labor market that we're in. But from this research, I think that there are some key points that I think are going to continue into the future, particularly around this trend towards more and more industries looking for more nimble associate's degrees, community college skills, professional training and certifications. I think that companies are recognizing the need and the value for apprenticeships and work-based learning. And then I think that companies are challenged to take a more critical look at the kind of networks that they use to access talent, particularly as they try to diversify their talent pipeline, to get access to kind of more skilled workers, and show more more of an emphasis on looking outside of the traditional bubble or the traditional networks that you work in. So I just wanted to thank everybody for your time and for your attention. I'm going to turn off the screen share now because I know that it can be a bit much to digest a whole lot of data in a short period of time. It can be like drinking from the fire hose. And so I want to kind of hand this over to Ashley to talk a little bit about what this work has meant for Wake County Economic Development over the last year and the work that they're doing, and then kind of start to have a little more Q&A and a little more discussion.
Thanks, Mike. And, I've heard you give this presentation a lot. And obviously we've worked together for years, but I think every time you give the presentation, I learn something new because, as you mentioned, everything is just constantly changing, right? And I think that is where probably a lot of you who are joining us today find yourselves. It's like, how do we make good decisions for our workforce so that we're relevant and that we're keeping up with the pace of change that's happening? And I think when you were talking about COVID, you said it was, arguably one of the strangest times we had ever been in. It's like, it keeps getting stranger, right? So it's like, how do we solve for those things? So I do want to encourage all of you to speak up. We want to hear from you about just your thoughts on what you've just heard. And, you know, I put in the chat, you know, one of the things we want to hear about is what surprised you about what you've just heard, and what's your general reaction? So Ryan, I think it's okay for people to just unmute and share your thoughts, but you can also just put them in the chat. And while you're thinking about what you want to say, you know, one of the prompts that Mike gave just now was just kind of how we're using this data. And I mentioned to you all in my opening comments that this has really changed everything for us at Wake County Economic Development in terms of how we work with businesses and how we approach equity and inclusion. You know, that data point around sourcing. You know, where are you most likely going to find your workers? And the answer in 2017 and in 2020 was both friends and networks. That was a really hard piece of data for us to digest in 2017, because that means that we have an inclusion problem when it comes to workforce sourcing. And I think that hopefully is getting better, especially as we see the data point around more companies embracing credentials of value, 2-year degrees. We see that edging out, actually 4-year degrees just slightly. So there's an inclusion element to that. But to know that if you're not a friend and you're not already in the network, there may be a barrier that exists for you in terms of entering meaningful employment. And so those are some of the things that we have really taken to heart. And one of the many reasons why we are now in this study about understanding and dismantling systemic racism in our community. I mean, a lot of these things are interconnected. And so the more we know and understand about our employer needs and the challenges that they're facing, the more we can dissect those and actually implement an understanding. I think we can all agree that that understanding piece is huge, but actually make some meaningful decisions that are going to keep us at the forefront of the talent wars, and, you know, ensuring that we are growing smartly, as I mentioned earlier. There's a comment here. I just want to make sure I'm addressing these as they come through. Cindy, it seems the public sector is shrinking. Jives with my daughter's frustration with finding jobs with MSW and youth development experience. So seems the public sector is shrinking. Mike, you got a comment to that?
That is an accurate analysis. I dropped a link in there. Of all the sectors and their outlook on growth over the last year, the public sector did have the least optimistic outlook on job growth, and we see this occur pretty frequently. And you know, whenever there's a recession, the government services, education, you know, social work, those sorts of public sector jobs tend to be the slowest to come back. And we see it with Wake County Public Schools as well, that they have a real staffing shortage, and that's a big contributor to that loss in public sector jobs. And that you know, is an incredibly challenging piece. That when I see that they're hiring bus drivers and school staff, and they can't staff up enough, and so there's real hiring challenges right now in the public sector.
One of the questions that we wanted you all to think about and sort of answer for are, how's this translating into the work that you're doing? Does this sync with what you're seeing and feeling in your day-to-day work? And what are you having to do differently to solve for some of these challenges? So I'd love to hear from some of you on that. And I will like randomly select, but would love to hear, how's this translating for you? Does this sync up with what you're hearing? Does anybody have anything that they'd like to share on that? And it can either be in the comments and I'll read it out, or you can unmute and share.
Okay, so I actually wanted to say, I think it was a few years ago, like maybe in 2019, I attended the NC Works Partnership Conference. And one of the things that they were saying is that they were predicting that companies would be looking more for people with skilled trades and like a community college degree. And it seems like that is what's happening. And so I'm glad to see that, that that's what they predicted and that that's what's happening. Because I think that people getting skilled trades and community college 2-year degrees, things like associate degrees and things like that, is really helpful, especially for for the clients that I work with. A lot of them, they want to get some sort of a trade.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for those of us, which are probably most everybody on this call, who kind of see the ins and outs of our workforce partners and resources, the community college being one of those things, I think we have felt that shift, right, for a while, but we didn't really have anything to point to say this is for sure happening in terms of order of importance. And Mike and I have talked about this quite a bit. You saw on Mike's slide that the education requirements, the 2-year degrees, the credentials of value, it just barely edged out a 4-year degree. But that's still enough to give us an indication that that is the trend. And there's a lot of great reasons why that is important. And I think it's important to also say, no one is saying that 4-year degrees are not important. They are. What we know, though, is that there is enough demand to go around, and companies really embracing upskilling within their organization, I think, is the trend that we've been trying to point them to for a really long time. And, it's interesting, the makeup of companies that we have in the Triangle, a lot of them are, we think about ourselves as this really innovative place, and we are, but a lot of companies are competing with companies that are in much larger areas, and they're thinking about the 4-year degree as just a baseline. And so to walk that mentality back has been a challenge, but I think it speaks to where we are in terms of companies feeling like they need to be more creative or step outside the box to get different types of talent through the door, so that they are sourcing enough talent to fill the roles. So I think we've known that that was a trend, but it was really hard to point to that it was actually happening. So when we got this data back this time, we were thrilled when we saw that. And one thing that I have done the last few years, there's a group of teachers, and some of you may be familiar with this, and I'm going to get the name completely wrong, but basically it's math teachers from Wake Tech and Wake County Public Schools who come together over the summer to share curriculum and learn new things. And anyways, I've given this presentation to them the last couple of years, and this year we talked about that data point, and one of the teachers said, it's so rewarding for me to know that when I tell my students, hey, you can come to Wake Tech and get whatever degree or credential and have a good career, that it's true. He's like, this has been like the most amazing thing to hear, because not all of my students are going to go to a 4-year university, and that gets us back again to that inclusion and that equity piece, and keeping that in mind. So Mike, I don't know if you want to add to that, but Catherine, I would say, yes, it's a trend, and now we actually have something to back it up, which is exciting.
I do want to add two things to that. One is that we noticed that it's not just in trades, it's not just in what we would think of as trades that are looking more seriously at community college degrees, but it's in IT, in healthcare, and in manufacturing that are, to a degree, you associate IT jobs and healthcare jobs with four-year degrees, but there are a lot of very high-paying jobs in IT and cybersecurity, and then healthcare technicians that you can come out with an associate's degree and make, make more money than I'm making right now. When we look at the job opportunities that are out there now, there's more and more sectors. So it's not just limited to what you think of as more sort of trades-based sectors, but healthcare, tech, advanced manufacturing. They're looking for people with really specialized skills. And then the other thing is that is the time. That an associate's degree is something that you can do in 2 years. You can do it while working. And in industries like that, where the technology and the business is changing so quickly, there's such a value to a shorter turnaround degree because we see that businesses are, the nature of work is changing faster than any of us can keep up. And the technology, the ways of doing business, keeping up with standards and regulations, all those things, it's hard for someone to come in with and say, well, I'm not going to be in the workforce for the next 4 years because I'm going off to college. And I think there's a huge value to that. And then also keeping in mind that the industries are changing really quickly. And so the value in that professional certification and that associate's degree is that it keeps you up to speed as these industries change really quickly.
Yeah, and I'll add just quickly to that. We've had in the last year 2 projects. One was a local expansion, one was a new company into the market, one was a life science company, the other one is a technology company, and they both were looking to hire high school seniors and recent graduates. For the technology company, that was starting them out in sort of a customer service call center type role, knowing that they could support them through additional education and training that they would be getting once they started working. And for the life science company, those were lab technician positions. So I think those are really important things to remember. And Kristen, I see you ask, what are the creative ways that employers are looking to close the skills gap? I think what employers are finding is they do a great deal of training on their own anyway. Now, when I say on their own, typically that means in partnership with the community colleges or working with the workforce board or whoever their partner may be, any of the universities. But they are engaging in additional training anyway. So it's that evaluation of, do we really have to have whatever degree or credential, understanding that we're going to invest in additional training anyways. And so it's been interesting for us to see high school written on a project summary form when we're evaluating the company and what they're going to be doing. And I think that the 2 companies that I have in mind that have done that, they also have quite a bit of efforts towards representation in career fields. So the life science company with the lab technicians, one of their passion projects as part of their DEI work is racial representation in lab positions. So there's a great deal of non-representation from people of color and women in these lab roles. And so it's a passion project of this company to make sure they are showing up in high schools and even middle schools and saying, here's a job that you might be interested in that you probably didn't know existed. And here's also someone who looks like you. Let us show you realistically that this is a pathway for you. And then before they even reach the barrier of college, they're saying, and you can come work with us and we will train you and skill you. And of course, that equates to lower turnover for them and loyalty sort of built in from the beginning with these employees that they are hiring. So what company is this? So the life science company is Invitae. They're a new company that has located in Morrisville. And then the technology company that I mentioned is HCL in Cary, which I think a lot of you have worked with HCL. I remember they got an award for their work with the Workforce Board several years ago. But those are the two companies that I had in mind.
And one company that I was thinking of when talking about life science and manufacturing is Merck. And Merck has been, investing in this 110 initiative with upskilling and advancing opportunities for Black workers in high-tech careers. And so they've been another example. They're based in Durham, here locally. They're based in Durham and are working to diversify their talent pipeline as well.
So I see and of course, anybody unmute if you have anything else that you want to ask or say, but I want to go back. There was a question here. With jobs being more in need, what do we need to do about the training and education piece? So Mike, I don't know if you have anything you want to say to that, but I think it's actually a great question for our group here who's actually doing that work, but would love your thoughts. And then if anybody in the audience has any thoughts on that.
Yeah, all I can follow up is saying that I did get a chance to present to the Wake County, the summer STEM with the public schools in Wake Tech over the summer. And they're taking this pretty seriously.
Any other comments from our audience? What are you seeing that's being done differently from a training and education perspective?
Well, I'm from Texas, and I know, but I am learning a lot about what I want to learn from y'all, my Texas accent. But what I wanted to know, I know that y'all are all in a certain area, but still, I need to know how to begin the process that you've been working in with my local community. So I kind of would like to know more structural, maybe on the backside of the conversation from someone. But what I want to say, what Forward Training Center is doing in Granbury, Texas, which is a very small town, but we have actually been blessed with an opportunity to do a Cisco networking academy right in our own building, and then CAD, which are two different programs which our architects need right away. There's a lot of construction going on, and that's a lucrative part here. But I think that for Forward Training Center, we teach the basic Jobs for Life program, but we're seeing that, and I'm hoping that nationally, somehow we can see how those can feed in, but also maybe even expand out to have the trades within that Christian faith-based organization. Because as we all know, I believe anyone on this conference probably is agreeing with me that that God is the factor and so us keeping them as close as we can, as long as we can in that environment, with the mentors working there, keeping in touch with them, us loving them through these other educational opportunities, I think enriches them. So that's just kind of a comment from me. And like I say, I would really like to know if somebody could contact me at a later time, maybe, and because we're not having that here, and I need to get all the things you said about the your commissioners and everybody all in a think tank to where we do begin to actually implement these things for the city would be beneficial to me. Thanks for.
Thanks for that comment. And Ryan, I didn't know if maybe you wanted to respond to that at all.
Sure, happy to. Katie, thank you so much for being with us. You're such a champion of Jobs for Life and all that you do. And so thank you. Yes, we'll have a conversation on the backs of this as to some things that can happen out in Granbury. But it just speaks to what Michael and Ashley have shared, is that, you know, these challenges are universal, right? They're in communities and cities across the country. We're working here specifically with Wake County, and there's some unique challenges which translate into opportunities. But I think one of the things that really came out of what you shared, Michael, and, you know, we had a conversation before, is, you know, really around networks, right? And you spin it from an employer's perspective that, you know, most of them are sourcing talent from the friends and networks of their current, you know, employees. But if we look at the other side of that and you ask individuals, well, how did you come across your job or your opportunity? And depending on what research, what data, you know, 30 to 70% of people say it was my friends and networks, right? And so that niche is just right there. And how do we begin to invite or create platforms, create venues such that individuals who don't have those connections, right? I mean, I said it last week, I'm sitting in this seat because I got a phone call, right, from someone in my network that let me know that this opportunity was available. And if I took a poll, I think most of us on this call would probably say the same. But a lot of individuals don't have that direct access, that direct line. And so I think, how do we begin to expand those conversations, those opportunities? And then I don't know, Michael, this is, again, you're in the data world. I think I also heard that about 70% of jobs never make it public facing. Right, a lot of them are showing to the on the inside, but a lot of those opportunities don't even make it out. So again, if you don't get the phone call, you don't even know the opportunity is there. So I think there's a tremendous opportunity and some things we can begin to think through and do right away.
Yeah, and I think I don't know that I could back up that second data point that you brought up, that you know, a large percentage of jobs are not public facing. But I can say from the first one, you know, that you mentioned, that friends and networks still continues to be, you know, vitally important. And so there are, I think, pieces to do on both sides, from the employer's point of view and from the job seeker's point of view. I think for employers, there's a challenge, and, you know, it's one we're looking at, as, you know, as RTI, as a large, you know, anchor company in the region. How are we being more and taking kind of a magnifying glass to the way that we recruit and we hire, and ensuring that we are casting a wide net and actively finding some of those barriers that job seekers face. And then from a job seeker's point of view, those you know, those networking skills and knowing how to put yourself out there and how to sell yourself is really difficult. But it is a component as well from a training point of view of learning those, the self-discipline, the interviewing skills, the kind of interpersonal skills is really of utmost importance, because, as you mentioned, it is still a lot about, you know, where you're connected and who you know, and just getting connected to that right opportunity. And this particularly applies to smaller businesses, because small businesses are such a, you know, central component of our economy, and they don't necessarily have the kind of dedicated HR departments to do these big overhauls of the way that they recruit and hire. You know, they do rely a lot more on those networks, and so from a small business point of view, and then employers who are job seekers who are looking for jobs at smaller businesses, that networking piece will continue to be important.
Yeah, and, you know, one thing I wanted to just add to that is sort of the other side of the coin of that sourcing question, or the other thing that kind of gets exposed through that data point, is that, yes, friends and networks are the primary, or one of the primary ways that employees are sourced. It also shows that a lot of the resources that we have are underutilized. So, when you look at the long list of like, where do you find employees from? And it's everything from friends and networks to staffing agencies to, internal referrals, but it's also our workforce board, our community college system, sort of all those, what I would call, I guess, public sector type resources that we all know are really great resources. They're underutilized, at least from the standpoint of the survey respondents. And so, part of our work, or part of the ways that we've used this data at Wake County Economic Development, is turn around to the employers to say, okay, you said this, so here's how we solve for that for you. And one of those is making sure that they are aware of the resources. But we also, really try to encourage, if you represent one of those resources, remember that you play to the parade and not the crowd. Sometimes we just get very focused on our work and don't take the time to sort of lift our head up and make sure that we're continuing to promote to those new businesses, the existing businesses that are growing, the expanded sort of talent pipeline. And so that's one of the charges that we've tried to deliver back to partners on all sides, is make sure these resources are known about, because the need is there. The need for alternative solutions to sourcing and training talent is there. That's not the question. It's just a matter of, do the right people know about it? So I'll offer that as sort of the other side to that data point as well. We've got another question from Kimberly. Were there any questions within the survey that intentionally, oh, sorry, Mike, you had started to respond. You want to go ahead and respond to it? I was going to read it out loud. Go ahead.
It was not something that we asked. And I think that it is something that we're going to ask in the future moving forward, because it's our goal is to focus on, broader questions around just skills and training and credentials overall, kind of regardless of the institution providing it. But I think that moving forward, to address these questions of equity and inclusion in the workforce, it is something that we should be looking at moving forward.
Yeah, and I would say, Kimberly, that is a great question, and Mike's right. It's definitely going to be more of a focus moving forward. I think that's the benefit of doing a survey that happens every, in our case, 2.5 to 3 years, is we are also able to kind of benchmark our community, where we were in 2017 when we first did this study versus where we are in 2021, fully, entrenched in Live Well Wake, which did not exist when we did this the first time. And, taking on this study to dismantle systemic racism. That was not something that was happening when we first started this initiative. So it's been really great to see how far we've come as a community as well, and have the ability, without changing the integrity of the survey, because we want to be able to benchmark, but have the ability to make sure we're putting out a product that's reflective of where we are as a community. So yes, hopefully that will be a part of our next run of survey, and I think that only makes good sense. Sorry, I'm trying to chit chat and read the chat at the same time.
They're rolling in now.
Let's see. Childcare and transportation are large barriers for job seekers looking to upskill. Yes, we continue to hear and see that. Be interested if anybody on the call has any specific thoughts on that.
From Jill from Dorcas Ministries of helping to address that barrier. That was one piece that we learned when working with the workforce boards a bit last year, was that they were having to move some of their career and hiring events online, and because they weren't having career events in person. And they found that talking to both the Durham Workforce Board and the Capital Area Workforce Board, that having hiring events online did generate challenges for people with limited internet access, but it also broke down a large barrier for a lot of job seekers who could not attend a career fair because they could not get childcare or transportation or the time to go to it. And so the workforce boards found that using some of these online resources to break down some of those barriers for job seekers who couldn't get childcare, couldn't get transportation, or the timing didn't work out with getting there. It's a large and challenging component, but they're starting to recognize that innovative ways to reach job seekers can help break down some of those barriers. There's also a piece around addressing the needs within the disabilities community. That's another one that's very underrepresented in job seeking. And so that wasn't something that we asked about specifically, but I would like to kind of learn from this group kind of what your experiences have been and ways that we can better address the challenges of the disabilities community in their kind of their search for good, for upskilling and jobs. I would like to hear kind of a little bit from your experience, if you're willing to share any lessons learned or best practices.
Thank you guys for that. Yeah, so feel free to respond if you would. I just want a couple of housekeeping things as the time winds down and we don't lose too many people. Monica, if you would drop the link one more time for a survey for session 2. We got great response from session 1. So we want you to complete the survey for session 2 and make sure you hang around, because before this is over, we do want to hear from the Live Well Wake Director, Kimberly Scott. And Commissioner Adamson was with us. I feel like she took a call, so we'd love to hear from her if she's able to peek back in. And I think we had Commissioner Thomas with us for a little while as well. So if there's any response to Michael's question around the disabilities community, please feel free to chime in, complete that survey, and again, hang around. We want to hear from Kimberly Scott before we close out. So I'll turn it back, Michael.
I had a comment. This is Jim Cotterill in Indianapolis. I'm out here in flyover country. Since we are in this area of the country, we have a lot of logistics companies here, a lot of warehousing, and we've had many companies who have a severe problem now in staffing. And we've been working with them with a second chance program that we've developed, where we're training inmates that are still in-house so that when they get out, they've been trained, and then we connect them with employers that are willing to offer a second chance. And in doing this work, 2 things have happened. One is we had a study done by a local university that showed that based on performance, work performance, there's absolutely no difference between someone with a criminal record and someone without any conviction. So that was positive. And then we also found out that the deeper the conviction, a felony versus a misdemeanor, the better the performer, which was kind of counterintuitive. So what this has done is opened many doors of many more employers to consider hiring these people. And recently we've been told by one employer that for the first time in 4 or 5 years, they're fully staffed as a result of these efforts. We ran a pilot transportation program carrying people in 15-passenger vans from a real high unemployment area in Indianapolis up to a plant that's 57 miles away, and took people from home to work and back every day. And this has been so successful. This is something that people might want to look into because of the American Rescue Plan Act, or what's called ARPA. There's a lot of federal dollars going to cities right now. And we put in a request for $1 million grant to expand our transportation. And we've been told that that was part of the budget that was approved yesterday. So soon we'll be able to expand this and have many more vans running to employers throughout the area. So you might want to look into that.
It's awesome, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing that and for being on the call. All right. Ashley, I'll let you just kind of close. There's any closing thoughts between you and Michael, and then pass it over to Kimberly, again, our fearsome leader of Live Well Wake, to maybe kind of close us out. And again, I want to encourage you to fill out that survey. That information and data, as Michael has already expressed, is very important. So we want to hear from you. We want to hear your voice and your thoughts, and that survey would allow us to do so. So I'll say, on behalf of Live Well Wake, on behalf of the Employment Work Group, on behalf of Jobs for Life, Workforce Development, we thank you all for being with us today. We look forward to you being with us next week. Same bat channel, same bat time. Make sure you're registered for session 3. And we're going to close this out with a living wage, wages that work conversation. So Ashley, I'll turn it back to you and Michael, and then we'll have Kimberly close us out.
Awesome. Thanks, Ryan. I'll just say very briefly in closing, one of the comments from our friend in Texas that joined us today is, how do you do this? And what I have found, I've been at Wake County Economic Development for 7 years now. And what I have found every time we are successful, or we kind of push the envelope a little bit, or we get out in front of anything, it's because we have really forward-thinking elected officials. I know Commissioner Adamson was on the call, as Ryan mentioned, and Commissioner Thomas as well. But Live Well Wake, the fact that it even exists is a testament to that. Whenever we approached both the county and the city of Raleigh about wanting to do the skills analysis, which was not cheap to get off the ground initially, it was overwhelming support, and yes, go do that. And so I'll say that is one of the ways that we're able to do a lot of these things, is because we partner really well together, but we also really care about smart growth in this community and making investments in the right things. So that's my little soapbox and my plug is one of the reasons why we have this data and information and can have conversations like this. So just want to say thanks to everybody who's invested in not just this work, but everything that you all do in your day-to-day lives and jobs. So Mike, I'll give you the last word, and then Kimberly, it's all you.
I'll just be brief. Thank you all so much. I enjoy being able to share and learn from practitioners who are doing this in the field every day and engaged in in this challenging work around connecting people and getting people prepared for good jobs. It's incredibly important. And I apologize. I had a minor technology issue. It's just wonderful to meet everyone, and thank you again.
And I would just like to echo what everyone else has said, in thanking both Michael and Ashley for leading today's conversation. Thank you to the Live Well Wake Employment Work Group for organizing this series. It has been incredible thus far to just start these important conversations. So thank you for all of your hard work and dedication. Just to give a brief overview, Live Well Wake is an initiative that aims to improve health and quality of life for all Wake County residents. And that's without regard to where you live, what your race is, your age, all of these things. We know that everyone deserves the opportunity to experience good health. So this initiative is really aiming to make sure that as a community, we create those conditions where people can thrive and live well. So employment is central to this work. We know that without good jobs, we can't access good housing or healthcare or all of these things that are essential to good health and quality of life. So Live Well Wake is dedicated to continuing this work. Again, we are so grateful for this committee for organizing this educational series to spark these conversations and to follow up with actionable strategies that will hopefully lead to better conditions for our community, using informed data and conversations with our community and peers to lead the way in our direction. So just thank you. Thank you to our network of partners. We have over 150 partners who have been involved in this work, along with strategic plans and our community health assessment data that will help guide us and support us in our decision making. So again, thank you all for your dedication to this work. And we are looking forward to continuing the conversation and following up with action items to make a difference and improve health and quality of life for Wake County residents.
That is awesome, Kimberly. Thank you so much for, again, your work. Thank you again to Ashley. Thank you, Michael, for taking the time. Thank you, Karen, for kicking us off today. Thank you again to the Employment Work Group. Listen, if you have not registered, make sure you do so. Session 3 is going to be exciting. There's going to be a lot of moving parts next week. Thank you, Kristen, for your work and your team, your committee, putting that all together for us next week, guys. And so make sure you share this event, share this work. Get on the survey, and look, we're not just going to do this series and wave our hand and say good job, high five everybody. This is the data, the information that we're going to look to really see how this Live Well Wake Employment Work Group can focus and move forward. And so we're grateful for each of our partners who have been a part of this, and we want to hear from you. We're thankful for our commissioners for being a part and supporting this work and getting this kicked off back in 2019, proclaiming September as Workforce Development Month. As Ashley says, that means they care, right? And we said last week, guys, that this work is possible, right? These solutions are attainable, but we need people around the table who first and foremost care. And when we care enough, we can find their solutions to the challenges that face us. And so we're committed to make it work, and we look forward to seeing you next week. God bless you all, and thanks again.